3 months ago, I was living in a $4.2 million house overlooking Lake Travis just outside Austin. My life looked perfect from the outside, shiny, symmetrical, and predictable in all the right ways. I was the man people pointed to and said, "He figured it out." My name is Ethan Callahan, 45 years old, senior risk analyst at a private firm that helped tech companies predict and prevent disasters. Ironically, I never predicted mine. I had a wife, Veronica, who everyone called stunning, not just beautiful but magnetic, the kind of woman who could walk into a crowded room and tilt it toward her. We met in college, two broke kids with matching ambition and shared coffee in paper cups. We built everything together, every brick, every dream, every promise. She built a successful career staging luxury homes, turning empty spaces into something people would fall in love with. And I was proud of her, proud of us. Our children, Liam and Sophie, were my reason for breathing. Liam, 17, was a gifted swimmer, already being scouted for college teams. Sophie, 14, had her mother's eyes and a knack for sketching life, as if it whispered secrets only she could hear. We lived in a house that felt more like a dream than a structure. Floor-to-ceiling glass, soft amber lights, a pool that reflected the Texas sky like liquid silver. I'd sit on the patio most evenings, watching the sun fold into the lake and think, this is it. This is everything I ever wanted. But if I'd looked closer, I might have noticed the cracks forming long before it all came apart. Veronica started getting phone calls she didn't want me to hear, stepping outside just a little too quickly. Her laughter changed, less warm, more practiced. She began returning home later, smelling faintly of someone else's perfume, not her own. I told myself it was stress, maybe burnout. We'd both been busy. We'd find our way back. I was wrong. In hindsight, the signs were obvious. The quiet dinners, the long silences, the unread messages. But when you love someone, you don't look for betrayal. You look for reasons to believe. 3 months ago, I was a husband, a father, a man who thought he understood his life. Today, I know it was all built on a lie. It started on a Monday morning that looked painfully ordinary, the kind of day where nothing should have gone wrong. The Texas sun poured through the kitchen windows, soft and golden, and the smell of coffee still lingered in the air. I remember Veronica walking past me without a word, her phone in her hand, her eyes fixed on something distant. Then the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man in a navy suit stood there, holding a thick envelope. "Mr. Callahan?" he asked. I nodded. "You've been served." Inside that envelope was the end of my life. Divorce papers. But not just divorce. A full-scale attack. The accusations were sharp enough to draw blood just by reading them. According to Veronica's lawyer, I was a compulsive gambler who'd siphoned funds from my company to cover personal investment losses. They claimed I'd been hiding debts, manipulating numbers, and lying for years. I read the words over and over, my hands trembling. None of it was true. Not a single line. When I confronted Veronica that night, she didn't flinch. She was calmly folding clothes into a suitcase, her back turned to me as if I were just background noise. "Veronica, what is this?" My voice cracked somewhere between anger and disbelief. "You tell me," she said coolly. "Your fake accounts, the missing money, the lies? I have no idea what you're talking about." She turned then, and the look in her eyes froze me. The kind of cold certainty you can't argue with. "You're not the man I married, Ethan. Maybe you never were." Within 2 weeks, I was suspended from work pending investigation. Someone had sent my boss evidence. Bank statements showing transfers to online trading platforms, casino deposits, and offshore accounts. None of it belonged to me. My login credentials had been used from locations I'd never visited. The hearing came fast. The courtroom was airless and sterile, the sound of papers shuffling louder than my heartbeat. Veronica's lawyer, precise and polished, presented proof of my double life. Doctored bank statements, falsified text messages, even testimony from a coworker claiming he'd seen me gambling on my phone. When the judge granted Veronica full custody, the house and the assets, she didn't look at me once. As I left the courthouse, she brushed past me and whispered, almost sweetly, "You'll never see them again." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a divorce. It was an execution, carefully planned, mercilessly delivered. I left Austin 3 days later with everything I owned stuffed into the trunk of my aging Honda. It felt strange how quickly a life could shrink. From a mansion with lake views to a few boxes of clothes and files I hoped might someday prove my innocence. I drove east through endless miles of highway, the landscape flattening with every hour until the hills disappeared and the air smelled of damp soil and memory. My destination was Dover, Ohio, a small, unremarkable town I hadn't seen since I was 18. My mother, Martha Callahan, had lived there until she passed 2 years ago. The house she left behind was modest, a single-story brick home on a quiet street with peeling white shutters and a mailbox that still bore her name in faded black letters. When I pulled into the driveway, twilight was settling over the neighborhood. The silence was almost reverent. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the front door I hadn't walked through since her funeral. Everything in me wanted to turn the key and drive away. But I didn't. Inside, the air was thick with that familiar scent, lavender, old books, and dust. The furniture hadn't moved. Her reading glasses still sat on the end table beside her favorite chair, lenses smudged. A stack of library books rested neatly on the counter, as if she might walk back in any second to finish them. I should have felt comforted. Instead, it felt like stepping into a museum of someone who'd loved me too much and told me too little. I slept that first night on the couch, listening to the creaks in the floorboards, the groan of the wind outside. The house seemed to breathe, alive in ways I couldn't explain. The next morning, I decided I'd renovate the place. Fresh paint, new floors, maybe replace the old fixtures. I'd sell it, use the money to fight for my kids, and rebuild what was left of my life. It sounded simple enough. But as I stood in the dim light of the basement stairwell later that week, staring at something that didn't belong there, I realized the house wasn't as empty as I thought. The basement was the one place in the house I had avoided. It always gave me a strange feeling when I was a kid, cold, damp, and humming faintly, like it had secrets buried in its walls. But the renovation meant facing every corner. So one gray afternoon, I carried down a box of tools and flipped the old light switch. The single bulb flickered weakly to life. Dust motes drifted in the air like ghostly snow. The concrete floor was cluttered with decades of stored life, rusted paint cans, boxes labeled Christmas, and an old sewing machine draped in a yellowed sheet. I started clearing things out, one box at a time, trying to focus on the task and not the memories pressing at the edges of my mind. That's when I noticed it. Faint drag marks etched into the concrete near the old water heater. At first, I thought maybe the movers had caused it when they'd brought the furnace in years ago. But then I realized something that made my stomach knot. The marks were fresh. I crouched down, running my fingers over the floor. The dust was uneven, thin trails where something heavy had been slid, revealing cleaner concrete underneath. The heater was massive, at least 200 pounds. My mother hadn't been strong enough to move it in her final years. Someone else had been down here, recently. The thought made the hair rise on the back of my neck. I spent the next 2 days convincing myself I was imagining things. But the feeling wouldn't leave. Every creak in the house sounded deliberate, like footsteps that stopped just as I turned my head. On the third night, I brought down a flashlight and pried loose the old baseboard near the furnace. Beneath it, a hollow sound echoed when I knocked. My pulse quickened. I pushed harder and the board gave way, revealing something metallic behind the wall, an outline, square and deliberate. It was a safe, an old, gray steel safe built directly into the concrete. The combination lock gleamed faintly in the beam of my flashlight. My hands trembled. My mother had never mentioned anything like this, and for the first time since the divorce, I felt the pull of something bigger than grief, something that whispered, "The truth is waiting." For 3 nights, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the image of that safe behind the furnace, gray, silent, waiting. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's calm smile and heard her voice saying the same thing she'd told me every birthday since I could remember. "You came into this world at exactly 6:18 a.m., and you've been surprising me ever since." It sounded absurd, but after hours of staring at that dial, I tried it anyway. 061875, the year I was born. I turned the wheel slowly, right, left, right. Then, a soft click. The door groaned open with a hiss of stale air, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. Old paper and something metallic, like rust and time. Inside were neatly stacked bundles of cash wrapped with faded rubber bands, some yellowed, some crisp. Underneath the money were documents, driver's licenses, passports, all with my mother's photo, but different names: Ellen Ross, Mary Vaughn, Clara DeVito. Her face in each one was slightly altered by age, hairstyle, or lighting, but it was her, no doubt. I felt my chest tighten. My mother, the quiet librarian who'd baked cookies for the neighbors and volunteered at church, had lived as half a dozen different people. At the very bottom of the safe was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Just Ethan, written in her looping, careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, they've found you, and I'm no longer here to protect you." My throat closed. I kept reading. "My real name was Elena Rossi. Your father, Marco Rossi, didn't die in a car accident. He was murdered. He worked for a financial group that laundered money for the Verona crime family. When he tried to expose them, they silenced him. I was supposed to die with him. I ran. You were 10 years old. The government placed us in the witness protection program and gave us new names, new lives, new lies. My vision blurred. I kept you safe for 35 years. But recently I heard the Veronas were searching again. They found you through your wife, Veronica. I believe they've been using her to reach you. The fabricated accusations, the financial evidence, it's all they're doing. They wanted to ruin you, drive you back here, to this house." There was a phone number written at the bottom in red ink. "Call Special Agent Raymond Holt with the Federal Bureau. Tell him Project Ferris has been reopened." My mother ended the letter with one line that broke me completely. "You are stronger than you think, my son. I gave you a false name, but you carry a true heart. Trust that. It will save you again." The room swayed around me. I was still clutching the letter when I heard a faint creak from upstairs. Slow, deliberate, unmistakable. Someone else was in the house. For a second, I couldn't move. The sound above me was faint, just the groan of an old floorboard, but too precise to be the house settling. Then came another, slow, careful. Someone was walking across the living room. My mother's letter slipped from my hands. The flashlight beam trembled across the concrete wall. I reached up and switched off the basement light, plunging the room into darkness. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. A man's voice drifted down from above, muffled, calm. "Check the back door. Make sure he hasn't left." There were at least 2 of them, maybe more. I scanned the room, searching for anything, any way out. The only exit was the narrow stairway that led straight toward them. My eyes landed on the old coal chute near the far corner, half rusted shut. My mother used to tell me never to touch it. I understood why now. I crept toward it, every step deliberate. My breath fogged in the cold air as I gripped the iron handle and pulled. The hinges screamed softly in protest, but the noise above covered it. Footsteps, drawers opening, a glass breaking. I squeezed through the narrow opening, scraping my shoulder against the metal, and dropped into the winter air outside. My feet hit the dirt, and I ran, barefoot, silent, into the trees behind the house. For minutes, maybe hours, I moved through the woods without direction. My lungs burned, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. When I finally reached the old gas station near the highway, the neon sign flickering above the pumps felt like salvation. I stepped into the payphone booth, cracked glass, sticky floor, and pulled the crumpled letter from my pocket. The red ink number blurred under my sweaty fingers. I dialed. 1 ring, 2, then a voice, steady, deep, immediately alert. Raymond Holt. Agent Holt, I whispered, trying to keep my voice from cracking. My name is Ethan Callahan. I found a letter from my mother, Elena Rossi. She told me to call you about something called Project Ferris. There was a long pause. Then he exhaled slowly. Son, I've been waiting 35 years for this call. Where are you right now? At my mother's old house in Dover. Don't go back there. Do not talk to anyone. Stay visible. Stay moving. I'll find you. The line went dead. I stood in the flickering neon light, shivering, as the weight of 35 years of secrets settled on my shoulders. Whatever my mother had started, it wasn't over. And now, I was part of it. Agent Raymond Holt arrived just before dawn. I spotted the unmarked black SUV pull up beside the gas station, headlights off, quiet as a shadow. A tall man stepped out, gray hair, sharp eyes that looked like they'd seen too much and still noticed everything. He flashed his badge only for a second before motioning me into the car. We drove in silence for miles, the highway empty except for the sound of wind. My hands still shook from the cold and the adrenaline, but Holt's calm steadiness kept me grounded. You look just like your father, he said finally. He was a stubborn man, brave, stupid sometimes, but brave. He took me to a secure facility on the outskirts of Cleveland. The place looked like a forgotten government office. No signs, no guards in uniform, but inside it hummed with quiet purpose. Files, photos, maps covered the walls. At the center of it all, a corkboard labeled Project Ferris. Holt handed me coffee and started explaining. Your mother, Elena Rossi, was one of 6 federal witnesses who testified against the Verona network in 1989. Your father had uncovered an offshore system they used to funnel money through legitimate tech firms. When he tried to expose it, they killed him. But Elena escaped with you. He paused, watching me absorb the words. She wasn't just hiding. She was helping us. She kept sending coded information, old account numbers, contact names. She was building a trail in case the Veronas ever came back. My voice trembled. They found us, didn't they? He nodded. 2 years ago. We intercepted chatter that they were searching for the Rossi boy. They approached your wife under false pretenses, told her you were laundering your father's money and hiding assets from her. She thought she was protecting herself and your children. He slid a photo across the table. Veronica, sitting at a restaurant with a man I didn't recognize. That's Nikolai Verona, Marco's old associate's son. He used your wife to plant evidence and drain your credibility. I swallowed hard. So she didn't know? Not at first, Holt said. But when she realized, it was too late. They were using her as bait to get you back to Ohio, where they thought your mother's files were hidden. The betrayal cut deep, but beneath it was something colder. Purpose. My mother hadn't just left me a letter. She'd left me a mission. And with Holt's next words, that mission began. They wanted to bury your family's truth, he said. Now we're going to dig it up and make them choke on it. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom again. But this time, the air felt different. The men who had destroyed my life sat across from me, dressed in sharp suits that couldn't hide the fear in their eyes. The Verona case had become one of the largest organized crime trials in recent years, and I was the final witness. When I took the stand, I wasn't Ethan Callahan anymore. I was Ethan Rossi, the son of Marco and Elena, the child of two people who had risked everything for the truth. My voice didn't shake as I told the jury about the decades of lies, the forged documents, the manipulation that nearly cost me my children. Every word felt like a promise to my mother. I'm finishing what you started. Veronica sat in the gallery, pale, silent, her eyes red from tears. We would never be what we once were. But she was trying, working with investigators, rebuilding what the Veronas had broken inside her. Forgiveness wasn't immediate, but it was possible. Sometimes that's enough. After the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I walked outside and felt the wind off Lake Erie hit my face. For the first time in years, it didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Liam and Sophie ran to me, their arms tight around my waist. They didn't ask for explanations anymore. They just knew their father had fought for them, and for the truth. Back home in Dover, I placed my mother's letter in a frame above my desk. Beneath it, I wrote the words she had lived by. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens to you leads you exactly where you need to be. I lost everything. My home, my name, my peace. But in the ashes of that destruction, I found my mother's courage inside me, and for the first time I understood what it meant to be truly free.